Loneliness is not sadness. It is not depression, though it often walks alongside both. Loneliness is a signal, ancient, automatic, and involuntary. It exists in the same category as hunger, thirst, and pain. Your body detects social isolation the way it detects a wound, and like a wound, if left untreated, it becomes infected. The human brain evolved in groups of 30 to 50 individuals. For hundreds of thousands of years, being alone meant death, predation, starvation, exposure. To be cast out was to be erased. So your nervous system learned to treat isolation as an emergency. It triggers a cascade of biological responses designed to reunite you with the group or prepare you for extinction. But in the modern world, loneliness has become chronic. Millions of people live in this state of biological alarm, day after day, year after year. Their bodies are screaming that they are in danger, and in many measurable ways they are. What follows are 100 facts about loneliness, its mechanisms, its consequences, and the silent ways it rewrites human biology. These are not metaphors. They are realities, documented and repeatable, about what happens when the most social species on Earth is left alone. Fact 1. The cigarette equivalence. Chronic loneliness increases your risk of early death by 26%, a mortality risk comparable to smoking 15 cigarettes per day. This is not a psychological effect. It is a physiological one. Loneliness triggers a stress response that, when sustained, damages nearly every system in your body. Your heart, your immune system, your brain, all register isolation as a threat on par with physical injury. The comparison to cigarettes is not rhetorical. It reflects measurable increases in cardiovascular disease, stroke, and systemic inflammation. Fact 2. The cortisol trap. When you are lonely, your body increases production of cortisol, the primary stress hormone. Cortisol is useful in short bursts. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, prepares you to flee or fight. But chronic loneliness keeps cortisol elevated indefinitely. This leads to inflammation, weakened immunity, and arterial damage. Your body is trying to survive an emergency that never ends. The biological cost accumulates silently, invisibly, until it manifests as disease. Fact 3. Genetic reprogramming. Loneliness alters the way your immune system functions at the genetic level. Researchers have found that lonely individuals show increased expression of genes related to inflammation and decreased expression of genes related to antiviral responses. Your body becomes better at fighting wounds that don't exist and worse at fighting infections that do. This genetic shift reflects an evolutionary adaptation to the kinds of threats solitary humans once faced, physical injuries from predators or combat. But in the modern context, it leaves you vulnerable to the diseases you're most likely to encounter. Fact 4. The sleep paradox. People who are lonely sleep poorly, even when they sleep alone by choice. Loneliness activates the brain's threat detection systems during sleep, making rest lighter and more fragmented. Your brain remains partially vigilant, scanning for danger, because evolutionarily, sleeping alone meant vulnerability. The result is that lonely people wake more often, spend less time in deep sleep, and feel less rested even after a full night in bed. Sleep becomes another arena where isolation extracts its toll. Fact 5. The dementia accelerator. Loneliness increases the likelihood of developing dementia by approximately 64% in older adults. Social isolation appears to accelerate cognitive decline in ways that remain independent of other risk factors like depression or physical inactivity. The mechanisms are still being mapped, but isolation seems to reduce cognitive reserve, the brain's ability to improvise and compensate when neurons begin to fail. Without regular social interaction, the brain has fewer reasons to maintain the neural pathways associated with language, memory, and executive function. They atrophy from disuse. Fact 6. Pain threshold collapse. Lonely individuals have a lower pain tolerance than socially connected people. Brain imaging studies show that social rejection activates the same neural pathways as physical pain, specifically the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex and the anterior insula. But beyond this overlap, chronic loneliness appears to sensitize the nervous system to all forms of pain. Small injuries feel larger. Headaches become migraines. The body's pain-modulating systems, which normally dampen discomfort, function less effectively in people who feel chronally isolated. Fact 7. The inflammation engine. Loneliness creates a state of chronic, low-grade inflammation throughout the body. This inflammation is measurable through biomarkers like C-reactive protein and interleukin-6. It damages blood vessels, promotes plaque formation in arteries, and increases the risk of heart attack and stroke. Inflammation is the body's response to injury or infection, but in lonely individuals, there is no injury to heal. The immune system is simply reacting to the perceived threat of isolation itself, mounting a defense against a danger that cannot be fought with white blood cells. Fact 8. Social threat hypervigilance. Loneliness rewires the brain to perceive social situations as threatening rather than rewarding. Neuroimaging studies show that lonely people exhibit heightened activity in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, when viewing images of social interactions. At the same time, activity decreases in regions associated with reward and pleasure. This creates a cruel paradox. The lonelier you become, the more your brain interprets social connection as a source of danger rather than relief. You begin to avoid the very thing you need most. Fact 9. The contagion effect. Loneliness spreads through social networks like a contagious disease. Research tracking thousands of individuals over decades found that if someone in your social network becomes lonely, your own risk of loneliness increases by 52%. The effect ripples outward through up to 3 degrees of separation. Loneliness is not just an individual experience. It is a social phenomenon that propagates through communities. When one person withdraws, it destabilizes the connections around them, creating a cascade of isolation. Fact 10. The hunger confusion. Lonely people are more likely to overeat, particularly foods high in fat and sugar. The brain regions that process social reward and food reward overlap significantly. Both activate the ventral striatum and release dopamine. When social connection is absent, the brain seeks reward through other channels. Food becomes a substitute, a way to briefly stimulate the same neural circuits that social bonding would activate. But the satisfaction is temporary and incomplete, leading to patterns of compulsive eating that provide comfort without connection. Fact 11. The blood pressure spike. Loneliness raises blood pressure more than obesity does. Studies tracking adults over 4 years found that lonely individuals experienced increases in systolic blood pressure of approximately 14 points, enough to move someone from normal to hypertensive range. This occurs independently of diet, exercise, or body weight. The mechanism appears to involve the chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system, which keeps blood vessels constricted and the heart working harder than necessary. Over time, this constant strain damages the cardiovascular system in irreversible ways. Fact 12. Immune suppression. People who are lonely get sick more often and stay sick longer. Their immune systems produce fewer antibodies in response to vaccines, and they take longer to heal from wounds. One study found that lonely college students produced only half the antibodies of socially connected students after receiving a flu vaccine. The chronic stress of loneliness depletes the resources the immune system needs to function. White blood cell counts may appear normal, but the cells themselves respond more slowly and less effectively to pathogens. Fact 13. The suicide threshold. Loneliness is one of the strongest predictors of suicidal ideation across all age groups. It operates independently of clinical depression, though the two often coexist. The risk is especially pronounced in men over 50, who are less likely to maintain social networks after retirement or divorce. Loneliness creates a cognitive state called thwarted belongingness, the belief that one is fundamentally disconnected from others and that this disconnection is permanent. When combined with perceived burdensomeness, this state dramatically increases suicide risk. Fact 14. Memory deterioration. Chronic loneliness impairs memory formation and retrieval. Isolated individuals perform worse on tests of episodic memory, the ability to recall specific events and experiences. Brain scans show reduced activity in the hippocampus, the region responsible for encoding new memories. Without regular social interaction, the brain receives fewer novel stimuli and has fewer opportunities to practice the cognitive skills involved in remembering conversations, faces, and shared experiences. The machinery of memory begins to rust. Fact 15. The perception shift. Lonely people interpret neutral social cues as negative or threatening. A slight delay in a text message response becomes evidence of rejection. A colleague's distraction is perceived as deliberate exclusion. This is not paranoia in the clinical sense, but rather a cognitive bias shaped by chronic threat detection. The brain, primed to anticipate social danger, begins to find it everywhere. This creates a self-fulfilling prophecy, where the lonely person's defensive behavior actually drives others away, confirming their fears of rejection. Fact 16. Alcoholism gateway. Loneliness significantly increases the risk of developing alcohol use disorder. Isolated individuals are more likely to use alcohol as a coping mechanism, and they're more likely to drink alone, a pattern strongly associated with addiction. Alcohol temporarily dampens the activity of the amygdala and reduces social anxiety, providing brief relief from the hypervigilance loneliness creates. But chronic alcohol use further damages social relationships and cognitive function, trapping the individual in a cycle where drinking increases isolation, which increases drinking. Fact 17. The touch deficit. Humans require physical touch to regulate their nervous systems, and loneliness often means touch deprivation. Skin-to-skin contact releases oxytocin, which lowers cortisol and blood pressure. It activates the parasympathetic nervous system, promoting calm and healing. Without regular touch, the body remains in a state of low-level agitation. Studies of orphaned infants in the mid-20th century showed that babies deprived of touch failed to thrive even when their nutritional needs were met. The need for physical contact does not disappear in adulthood. It simply becomes invisible. Fact 18. Workplace performance collapse. Lonely employees are less productive, more absent, and more likely to quit their jobs. Loneliness impairs concentration, decision-making, and creativity, all executive functions that depend on the prefrontal cortex. When the brain is preoccupied with social threat detection, fewer resources are available for complex cognitive tasks. Additionally, lonely workers are less likely to collaborate effectively or ask for help, which isolates them further and compounds performance problems. The economic cost of workplace loneliness is estimated in the billions annually. Fact 19. The cold response. Loneliness makes you feel physically colder. Multiple studies have found that socially excluded individuals estimate room temperatures to be several degrees lower than socially included individuals in the same room. They also prefer warmer foods and drinks. This is not metaphorical. It reflects a deep connection between social warmth and thermal regulation. The insula, a brain region that processes both social rejection and temperature, may be the neural link. Isolation literally leaves you cold. Fact 20. Accelerated aging. Loneliness speeds up the aging process at the cellular level. Telomeres, the protective caps on the ends of chromosomes, shorten more rapidly in lonely individuals. Shortened telomeres are associated with cellular aging and increased risk of age-related diseases. The chronic stress of loneliness appears to accelerate the biological clock, making your cells older than your chronological age. A lonely 50-year-old may have the cellular profile of someone 5 to 10 years older. Fact 21. The empathy erosion. Chronic loneliness reduces your ability to empathize with others. Brain imaging studies show decreased activity in regions associated with perspective-taking and emotional understanding when lonely individuals view others in distress. This is not callousness but self-protection. When your brain is focused on detecting threats to your own social survival, it has fewer resources to dedicate to understanding others' emotional states. Ironically, the lonelier you become, the harder it is to perform the very cognitive tasks, reading emotions, offering support, that might reconnect you to others. Fact 22. Seasonal amplification. Loneliness intensifies during winter months, particularly in regions with limited daylight. The combination of seasonal affective disorder and social isolation creates a compounding effect. Shorter days reduce serotonin production and disrupt circadian rhythms, while cold weather provides a rational excuse to avoid social contact. Lonely individuals are more vulnerable to winter depression, and winter depression deepens loneliness. The suicide rate in isolated populations peaks not in the darkest months, but in spring, when the contrast between one's internal state and the world's renewal becomes unbearable. Fact 23. The doctor avoidance pattern. Lonely people are less likely to seek medical care, even when experiencing symptoms of serious illness. This avoidance stems partly from lack of social support. There's no one to encourage doctor visits or notice declining health, but it also reflects a diminished sense of self-worth. When you feel disconnected from others, your own survival begins to seem less important. You don't schedule the screening. You don't fill the prescription. Small acts of self-care require a belief that your life matters to someone, and loneliness erodes that belief. Fact 24. Decision-making impairment. Loneliness degrades your ability to make rational decisions. Studies show that lonely individuals are more likely to make risky financial choices, fall for scams, and engage in impulsive behavior. The prefrontal cortex, which governs executive function and impulse control, shows reduced activity in chronically lonely people. Additionally, the lack of social feedback, no one to discuss decisions with, no one to provide perspective, means errors in judgment go uncorrected. Isolation removes the external checks that normally guide decision-making. Fact 25. The pet substitution. Pet ownership can reduce some physiological markers of loneliness, but it cannot fully substitute for human connection. Interacting with a dog or cat lowers blood pressure and increases oxytocin, providing genuine physiological benefits. However, pets cannot provide the reciprocal emotional understanding that human relationships offer. They cannot validate your experiences, offer advice, or share complex emotional states. For some lonely individuals, pet relationships become a comfortable endpoint rather than a bridge back to human connection, creating a stable but limited form of social engagement. Fact 26. The night differential. Loneliness feels more intense at night. The circadian rhythm that governs alertness and mood reaches its lowest point in the early morning hours, between 2 and 4 a.m. During these hours, the brain's threat detection systems remain active, while the rational, regulatory functions of the prefrontal cortex are diminished. Lonely people report that feelings of isolation, worthlessness, and despair intensify dramatically during these hours. Nighttime loneliness is not just loneliness experienced at night. It is qualitatively different, more primal and overwhelming. Fact 27. Social media paradox. Heavy social media use is associated with increased loneliness, not decreased. The mechanism is complex. Social media provides a simulacrum of connection, likes, comments, follows, that activates reward circuits just enough to be reinforcing, but not enough to satisfy the deep need for genuine intimacy. Time spent on social platforms often replaces time spent in face-to-face interaction. Additionally, social media curates an unrealistic picture of others' lives, promoting upward social comparison and envy. You see everyone else's connections and conclude you're uniquely isolated. Fact 28. The grocery store effect. Lonely people shop for groceries more frequently, not because they need food, but because it provides a minimal form of human contact. The brief exchange with a cashier, the presence of other shoppers, the routine of a shared public space. These offer small doses of social stimulation. Researchers have found that isolated individuals make multiple short shopping trips rather than one efficient weekly trip. The supermarket becomes a secular church, a place to be among people without the vulnerability of actual interaction. Fact 29. Chronic pain amplification. Loneliness makes chronic pain worse. Studies of patients with conditions like fibromyalgia and arthritis show that those who are socially isolated report higher pain levels and require more pain medication than connected patients with identical diagnoses. The relationship is bidirectional. Pain makes socialization harder, and isolation makes pain more intense. The brain's descending pain modulation system, which normally dampens pain signals, functions less effectively in lonely individuals. Pain that might be manageable with social support becomes disabling without it. Fact 30. The authenticity trap. Lonely people often believe they must find authentic connection, perfect understanding, complete acceptance, before they can engage socially. This sets an impossibly high bar that prevents them from forming the casual, incremental relationships that might eventually deepen into meaningful ones. The search for authentic connection becomes a justification for avoiding all connection. Meanwhile, research shows that even superficial positive interactions, chatting with a barista, exchanging pleasantries with a neighbor, provide measurable psychological and physiological benefits. The perfect becomes the enemy of the sufficient. Fact 31. The voice chain. Chronic loneliness alters the sound of your voice. Isolated individuals speak with less vocal variety, narrower pitch range, and lower volume. These changes occur unconsciously and reflect reduced social engagement. When you speak infrequently, the muscles controlling vocal production receive less practice. But the change also reflects emotional flattening, the dampening of affect that occurs when emotions go unshared. Other people unconsciously detect these vocal changes and may perceive lonely individuals as less approachable, creating another barrier to connection. Fact 32. Hoarding behavior. Loneliness is a significant risk factor for compulsive hoarding. Objects become substitutes for relationships. They provide a sense of security and control that human connections do not. For lonely individuals, discarding possessions can feel like abandoning companions. The accumulation of objects also creates a physical barrier that prevents others from entering the living space, which reinforces isolation. Hoarding is often misunderstood as mere disorganization, but in many cases, it reflects a desperate attempt to fill the space where human connection should be. Fact 33. The mirror test. Lonely people spend less time looking at themselves in mirrors. This avoidance is not about physical appearance, but about confronting the self. Mirrors reflect not just the face, but the person's aloneness. Studies show that isolated individuals are more likely to remove or cover mirrors in their homes. When forced to look at their reflection, lonely people report feelings of disconnection. The person in the mirror seems like a stranger. This depersonalization is the mind's way of protecting itself from the full weight of its isolation. Fact 34. Immune system aging. Loneliness causes the immune system to age faster than the rest of the body. The thymus gland, which produces T cells crucial for immune function, shrinks more rapidly in lonely individuals. This immunosenescence, immune aging, leaves people vulnerable to infections, cancers, and autoimmune diseases. The chronic inflammation caused by loneliness speeds this process. A lonely 40-year-old may have the immune profile of someone 10 years older, making them biologically more susceptible to the diseases of old age. Fact 35. The silence accumulation. People who live alone and work remotely can go days without speaking aloud. This extended silence has physiological consequences beyond loneliness itself. The vocal cords stiffen. The muscles of the face and jaw tense from lack of use. The brain regions associated with language processing show reduced activity. When speech finally occurs, it feels effortful and unnatural. Some isolated individuals report that their own voice sounds foreign after long periods of silence, as if it belongs to someone else. Fact 36. Conspiracy thinking. Loneliness increases susceptibility to conspiracy theories and paranoid thinking. When you lack regular social contact, you have fewer opportunities to reality test your beliefs against others' perspectives. The brain's pattern recognition systems, operating without external correction, begin to detect patterns that don't exist. Conspiracy theories also provide a kind of substitute community, online groups of believers who offer acceptance and shared purpose. For some lonely people, the conspiracy community becomes their primary social world, reinforcing both the beliefs and the isolation. Fact 37. The shower extension. Lonely people take longer showers and baths and prefer hotter water. Research suggests this is a form of self-soothing, a way to simulate the warmth and comfort of human contact. The physical sensation of warm water on skin activates some of the same neural pathways as gentle touch. Lonely individuals also report that the shower is one of the few places they feel relaxed and safe. The extended bathing ritual becomes a daily comfort practice, a brief respite from the cold of isolation. Fact 38. Reading comprehension decline. Chronic loneliness impairs the ability to understand and remember what you read. This occurs even in highly educated individuals who were once avid readers. The mechanism involves working memory and attention. When your mind is preoccupied with social threat assessment and rumination about isolation, fewer cognitive resources are available for encoding and processing written information. You can stare at a page for an hour and retain nothing. Books that once provided escape and engagement become impossible to follow. Fact 39. The time zone drift. Isolated people often drift into nocturnal schedules, sleeping during the day and waking at night. Without social obligations to anchor their circadian rhythms, they gravitate toward hours when their aloneness feels more normal, when the rest of the world is also quiet and dark. This inverted schedule further isolates them from potential social contact. It also disrupts the body's natural rhythms, worsening mood disorders and metabolic dysfunction. The drift into night is both consequence and cause of deepening isolation. Fact 40. Nostalgia addiction. Lonely people become trapped in cycles of nostalgia, repeatedly revisiting memories of past relationships and happier times. Nostalgia provides temporary comfort, a reminder that connection was once possible, but chronic nostalgia prevents engagement with the present and future. Brain imaging shows that nostalgia activates reward centers, making it genuinely addictive. Each return to the past provides a small dopamine hit, which reinforces the behavior. Meanwhile, the present becomes increasingly unbearable by comparison, and the motivation to build new connections withers. Fact 41. The stranger bot. Lonely people are more likely to confide in complete strangers than in acquaintances. This phenomenon, called the stranger on a train effect, occurs because strangers present no risk of ongoing judgment or social consequences. You can reveal yourself completely to someone you'll never see again without fear of it affecting your social standing. For deeply lonely people, these brief encounters with strangers may represent their only moments of genuine self-disclosure. The conversations are often intense and intimate, but they end when the train stops. Fact 42. Facial recognition impairment. Chronic loneliness degrades the ability to recognize and remember faces. The fusiform face area of the brain, which specializes in facial processing, shows reduced activity in isolated individuals. This occurs because face recognition is a use it or lose it skill. With limited social interaction, the neural circuits dedicated to distinguishing and remembering faces atrophy. Lonely people begin to experience everyone as vaguely unfamiliar, even people they've met multiple times. This makes new social connections harder to form and maintain. Fact 43. The lottery fantasy. Lonely people spend more money on lottery tickets and gambling. The fantasy of winning serves a specific psychological function. It imagines a future where sudden wealth makes connection possible. Money becomes the imagined solution to isolation, even though research consistently shows no correlation between wealth and loneliness. The lottery ticket represents hope not just for financial security, but for social transformation. The few dollars spent each week maintain a thin thread of possibility that life could be different. Fact 44. Appetite suppression. While some lonely people overeat, others lose their appetite almost entirely. Eating alone removes the social reinforcement that makes meals pleasurable. Food becomes mere fuel, joyless and mechanical. The brain's reward response to food is significantly dampened when eating occurs in isolation. Some lonely individuals report going days eating only minimal amounts, not from anorexia or deliberate restriction, but from genuine lack of interest. The body begins to forget that eating can be pleasurable. Fact 45. The documentary companion. Lonely people develop parasocial relationships with documentary narrators, podcast hosts, and YouTubers, voices that provide the illusion of companionship. These one-sided relationships activate some of the same neural circuits as real friendships. The familiar voice becomes a comfort, a presence in the empty room. People report feeling genuine grief when a favorite content creator stops producing material, as if they've lost a friend. These relationships are not pathological, they're adaptive responses to isolation, but they cannot provide the reciprocity that true connection requires. Fact 46. Time perception distortion. Loneliness distorts the perception of time. Days feel simultaneously endless and meaningless. Without social interaction to create memorable events and structure time, days blur together. Lonely individuals often cannot recall what they did the previous week because nothing distinctive happened. Time becomes a featureless expanse rather than a series of moments. This contributes to the sense that life is passing without being lived, that years disappear without accumulation of meaningful experience. Fact 47. The cleanup delay. Lonely people are more likely to leave dishes unwashed, laundry unfolded, and living spaces cluttered. This is not laziness, but a reflection of diminished self-worth and lack of social accountability. When no one visits, there's no external reason to maintain order. The mess accumulates gradually until the task becomes overwhelming. Cleaning requires believing that the space and the person inhabiting it matter. Loneliness erodes that belief. The deteriorating environment then reinforces the sense of personal deterioration. Fact 48. Emotional numbing. Extended loneliness leads to emotional blunting, a reduction in the intensity of all emotions, not just negative ones. Joy, excitement, and love become as muted as sadness and anger. This numbing is protective. The brain dampens emotional responsiveness to prevent the pain of isolation from becoming overwhelming. Brain scans show reduced activity in the anterior cingulate cortex and insula, regions involved in emotional processing. The world becomes gray. Nothing moves you. You exist in a state of profound indifference. Fact 49. The thank you deficit. Lonely people rarely hear the words thank you. Gratitude typically flows from acts of service and mutual aid, which require ongoing relationships. Without people to help or be helped by, lonely individuals exist outside the cycle of reciprocal appreciation. This absence is more significant than it appears. Hearing thank you confirms that your actions have value to others, that you matter. Without this regular confirmation, the sense of being a meaningful participant in the world erodes. You begin to doubt whether your existence affects anyone. Fact 50. Sleep architecture collapse. Loneliness fundamentally restructures sleep. Not only do lonely people sleep poorly, but the quality of their sleep deteriorates across all stages. REM sleep, crucial for emotional processing and memory consolidation, becomes fragmented. Deep slow-wave sleep, essential for physical restoration, decreases. The sleep that does occur is less restorative. Lonely individuals wake feeling as though they haven't slept at all. Over months and years, this sleep disruption contributes to cognitive decline, mood disorders, and physical illness. Sleep, which should be refuge, becomes another domain of dysfunction. Fact 51. The birthday silence. Many lonely people spend their birthdays without receiving a single acknowledgement from another person. No calls, no texts, no cards. Social media has made this simultaneously more visible and more painful. Algorithms may remind you it's your birthday while simultaneously confirming that no one else remembered. The birthday becomes an annual marker of isolation, a day that highlights rather than celebrates your existence. Some lonely people begin lying about their birth date to avoid the painful silence, or they delete their birthday from social platforms entirely. Fact 52. Conversation rehearsal. Lonely people mentally rehearse conversations that will never happen. They script dialogues with imagined friends, practice explanations for their lives, prepare responses to questions no one is asking. This rehearsal serves multiple functions. It maintains language skills, provides comfort, and keeps alive the possibility of future connection. But it also consumes enormous cognitive resources. Hours each day may be spent in elaborate imaginary interactions, while real opportunities for conversation pass by. The fantasy becomes preferable to the risk. Fact 53. The medication era. Lonely individuals are less likely to take prescribed medications correctly. Without someone to remind them, monitor their health, or share the burden of managing chronic illness, adherence drops dramatically. Pills are forgotten. Prescriptions aren't refilled. Doctors' instructions are misunderstood and never clarified. The result is that treatable conditions worsen. Diabetes goes uncontrolled. Blood pressure remains elevated. Infections that could be cured with antibiotics become serious. The absence of social support, quite literally, makes medication stop working. Fact 54. The phantom vibration. Lonely people are more likely to experience phantom vibrations, the sensation that their phone is ringing or vibrating when it isn't. This occurs because the brain, desperate for connection, misinterprets random neural noise as incoming contact. The phenomenon reflects both the intensity of the desire for communication and the brain's pattern-seeking behavior. Each phantom vibration represents a small surge of hope followed by immediate disappointment. The cycle repeats dozens of times per day. Fact 55. Handwriting deterioration. People who rarely write by hand, which increasingly includes the chronically lonely, experience deterioration of fine motor control in their hands. Handwriting becomes shaky and illegible, but the change is more than physical. Handwriting is typically used for personal communication, notes to others, cards, and letters. Its disappearance reflects the absence of these intimate acts. When lonely people do attempt to write by hand, they often report that their handwriting looks unfamiliar, as though produced by someone else. Another small piece of identity lost to disuse. Fact 56. The weather obsession. Lonely people check the weather forecast obsessively, often multiple times per day. Weather becomes a safe topic of internal focus, a neutral external force to monitor and predict. It provides structure, something to prepare for, plan around, discuss with the self. Weather apps become frequently visited companions. The forecast offers the illusion of control and the comfort of routine. For some, weather tracking becomes a special interest, consuming hours of research into meteorological patterns. It's a way to remain cognitively engaged when social engagement is absent. Fact 57. Anniversary mourning. Lonely people mark the anniversaries of losses and endings with acute psychological distress. The anniversary of a divorce, a death, a move, a job loss. These dates trigger depressive episodes even years later. Without new positive memories to overlay the painful ones, the past remains vivid and present. Each anniversary is relived in full emotional detail. For chronically lonely people, the calendar becomes a minefield of dates to dread. Time doesn't heal, it just accumulates scar tissue. Fact 58. The skill abandonment. Loneliness causes people to abandon hobbies and skills they once loved. Musical instruments gather dust. Art supplies remain unopened. Craft projects are started and never finished. This occurs partly because many hobbies have a social component. You learned guitar to play with others, took up painting for a class, started running with a group. When the social context disappears, the activity loses meaning. But it also reflects the cognitive and motivational deficits loneliness creates. Complex activities require executive function and sustained attention, both of which loneliness impairs. Fact 59. The diagnosis relief. Some lonely people feel profound relief upon receiving a medical or psychiatric diagnosis, even a serious one. The diagnosis provides an explanation for their isolation that feels less shameful than simple unwantedness. It reframes loneliness as a consequence of illness rather than personal failure. The diagnosis also connects them, however briefly, to a medical system and healthcare providers. It gives them something to talk about, something to manage. For a moment they are not alone, they are a patient, which is at least a role in relationship to others. Fact 60. The expiration check. Lonely people obsessively check expiration dates on food and medications, then discard items well before they've actually expired. This behavior reflects a preoccupation with time passing and things ending. It's also a small act of control in a life that feels out of control. The discarding creates a sense of activity and decision-making, but it's wasteful and self-defeating, creating financial strain that further limits social opportunities. The expired items become metaphors for the self, outdated, unusable, meant to be thrown away. Fact 61. The crowd preference. Lonely people often prefer being in large crowds rather than small groups. In crowds, they can be near others without the pressure of interaction. A busy coffee shop, a shopping mall, a movie theater, these spaces provide anonymous proximity. Small gatherings, by contrast, demand participation and risk exposure. In a crowd, you can be alone together with hundreds of others doing the same. The crowd offers the presence of humanity without the vulnerability of connection. It's loneliness's most common compromise. Fact 62. Name forgetting. Chronic loneliness impairs the ability to remember names, even of people you've met multiple times. Name recall requires that you care about the person and anticipate future interactions. When your brain has learned that relationships don't persist, it stops encoding names as important information. This creates a vicious cycle. Forgetting someone's name makes reconnection awkward, which makes connection less likely, which makes name encoding even less important. Eventually, lonely people stop trying to remember names at all. Fact 63. The left behind. Lonely people describe a feeling of having been left behind, as if everyone else received instructions for life that they missed. Others seem to navigate relationships effortlessly, knowing instinctively how to make friends, maintain connections, belong to groups. The lonely person feels fundamentally different, operating with incomplete information. This is not entirely paranoia. Social skills are learned through practice, and isolation prevents practice. The gap between the lonely person's social competence and that of their peers widens over time, making the feeling of being left behind increasingly accurate. Fact 64. The object conversation. Lonely people talk to objects, their plants, their car, household items. This is not psychosis. It's a way to maintain language use and to practice the rhythms of conversation. The object cannot respond, but it can be addressed. It provides a recipient for thoughts that would otherwise circle endlessly inside the mind. Some lonely people report that they've developed elaborate routines of talking to their coffee maker in the morning or narrating their activities to their houseplant. These one-sided conversations prevent complete linguistic isolation. Fact 65. Sleep position rigidity. People who sleep alone for extended periods develop rigid sleep positions and become unable to share a bed comfortably. They sprawl across the entire mattress, use multiple pillows in specific arrangements, and wake if anything disrupts the pattern. This is more than habit. The sleep position becomes part of identity, a rare area of complete autonomy. The thought of accommodating another person in the bed feels impossible. This physical rigidity can become a barrier to intimacy if opportunity for connection arises. Fact 66. The accumulation anxiety. Lonely people experience anxiety about objects accumulating in their homes, mail, packages, recyclables, but feel paralyzed to deal with them. The accumulation represents demands from the outside world that feel overwhelming without social support to help manage them. A pile of unopened mail becomes a monument to incapacity. Each piece requires decisions, responses, engagement with systems and bureaucracies. Without someone to share the burden, the pile grows until it becomes a source of shame and anxiety that further inhibits action. Fact 67. Digital hoarding. Loneliness contributes to digital hoarding. Thousands of unread emails, hundreds of browser tabs, gigabytes of downloaded files never organized. Digital space, unlike physical space, is nearly limitless, which allows the accumulation to grow unchecked. Each saved item represents a potential future task or interest, maintaining the illusion of a future in which you'll have time, energy, and connection to engage with it. The digital hoard becomes a kind of second mind, external storage for a life not being lived. Fact 68. The anticipatory grief. Lonely people mourn relationships before they're over. When they do form a connection, even a tentative one, they immediately begin anticipating its end. This anticipatory grief is protective. If you expect loss, you can't be surprised by it. But it also prevents full presence in the relationship. You're already mourning while the other person is still there. This emotional preemptive strike often becomes self-fulfilling. The other person senses the withdrawal and themselves pulls away, confirming the lonely person's expectations. Fact 69. The inheritance fantasy. Some lonely people fantasize about inheriting money or property from distant relatives they've never met. This fantasy is less about wealth than about mattering. Someone they don't know chooses them, singles them out, acknowledges their existence. The inheritance fantasy imagines being remembered, being thought of, being considered worthy. It's a roundabout way of imagining being loved. When a distant relative actually dies without leaving them anything, lonely people often feel surprisingly devastated by what is, objectively, a non-event. Fact 70. Seasonal affective resistance. Lonely people are less responsive to standard treatments for seasonal affective disorder. Light therapy, vitamin D, and exercise help most people, but their effectiveness is diminished in those who are chronically isolated. This occurs because seasonal depression in lonely people isn't purely biochemical, it's existential. The darkness outside mirrors the darkness inside. Light alone cannot address the fundamental absence of human warmth. The seasons change, but the loneliness remains constant, making seasonal variation almost irrelevant. Fact 71. The compliment rejection. When lonely people receive genuine compliments, they often reject or dismiss them. This occurs because the compliment conflicts with their internal self-image, which has been shaped by isolation and rejection. Cognitive dissonance makes the positive feedback feel false or manipulative. They're just being nice, or they don't really know me, or they want something. The compliment cannot penetrate the defensive walls built by chronic loneliness. Over time, this rejection of positive feedback ensures that even when connection is offered, it cannot be received. Fact 72. The spatial compression. Lonely people's living spaces often shrink to a single room or even a single chair. The rest of the home falls into disuse. They eat, sleep, work, and exist in one small area while other rooms gather dust. This compression reflects a withdrawal from life itself. A full house requires energy to maintain and implies a life large enough to fill it. The compressed space is more manageable, more appropriate to a shrunken existence. It's also easier to heat, to clean, to control. The walls close in. Fact 73. The news addiction. Lonely people compulsively consume news, often spending hours daily on news sites or watching news channels. The news provides a sense of connection to the wider world and the illusion of being informed and engaged. It creates a feeling of participation in collective experience. Everyone is reading about the same events. But news consumption is passive and often upsetting, increasing anxiety without providing actual connection. The lonely person becomes an expert on current events, but has no one to discuss them with. The knowledge sits inert. Fact 74. The gift giving. Some lonely people give gifts compulsively, often expensive ones, to casual acquaintances. This gift giving is an attempt to purchase affection and create obligation. If I give enough, they'll have to stay. If I'm generous enough, they'll want to see me. But relationships built on material exchange feel hollow even when they succeed. The recipient may accept the gifts while maintaining emotional distance, which deepens the giver's sense of being used. The giving becomes more desperate, the emotional return diminishes, and the pattern reinforces itself. Fact 75. Memory distortion. Lonely people often misremember their past as more socially connected than it actually was. Memory is reconstructive, and the pain of current isolation colors recollection. Past acquaintanceships are remembered as close friendships. Brief encounters become meaningful relationships. This distortion serves a purpose. It maintains hope that connection is possible, that it once existed and therefore could exist again. But it also creates confusion about why current attempts at connection fail. If it was once so easy, why is it now impossible? Fact 76. The breakup relief. Some people feel secretly relieved when a relationship ends, even if they initiated the connection. The relationship created anxiety and obligation that felt unsustainable. Being alone is painful, but it's familiar and controllable. Relationship requires vulnerability, adaptability, compromise, all of which feel impossibly difficult after years of solitude. The return to isolation feels like coming home. This relief is often followed by shame, which further entrenches the pattern. I don't even want connection. Something is fundamentally wrong with me. Fact 77. The fantasy relationship. Lonely people often maintain elaborate fantasy relationships with celebrities, fictional characters, or people they barely know. These fantasies can be romantic, platonic, or familial. The imaginary relationship provides comfort without risk. The other person is perfect because they never contradict the fantasy with real behavior. These relationships can become so vivid that the lonely person experiences genuine emotional intimacy with someone who doesn't know they exist. When reality intrudes, the celebrity dies, the acquaintance moves away. The grief is real and profound. Fact 78. Tactile seeking. Some lonely people seek touch through transactional means: massage therapy, hair salons, medical appointments. These professional touches are sanitized and boundaried, safe because they cannot lead to relationship or rejection. A haircut provides 30 minutes of hand contact with another human. A massage offers an hour of sustained touch. These experiences are intensely meaningful to the touch-deprived, sometimes moving them to tears. The professional maintains boundaries that prevent discomfort while providing a basic human need. Fact 79. The audience imagination. Lonely people often imagine audiences for their activities. They narrate their thoughts as if speaking to someone. They perform tasks as if being watched. This imagined audience provides motivation and structure, someone to impress, someone to explain to, someone witnessing the life being lived. The habit often begins in childhood, an imaginary friend who never left. For some, the audience becomes more real than actual people. They shape their behavior around these invisible witnesses, whose approval and attention never wavers. Fact 80. The comparison trap. Lonely people engage in constant social comparison, measuring their isolation against others' apparent connection. Social media makes this comparison unavoidable and punishing. Everyone else seems to have friends, partners, community. The comparison leads to two contradictory conclusions. I'm uniquely defective, and everyone is lying about their happiness. Both conclusions increase isolation. The defectiveness narrative prevents reaching out. The cynicism narrative prevents trusting others' offers of connection. The trap closes from both sides. Fact 81. The erosion of surprise. Chronic loneliness eliminates the feeling of surprise. When every day is essentially identical, when nothing unexpected happens, the brain stops maintaining the neural circuitry for novelty detection. Lonely people report that even objectively surprising events, winning money, receiving unexpected contact, feel flat and predictable. The capacity for delight atrophies. This creates a catch-22. Connection requires the ability to be pleasantly surprised by others, to find them interesting and unpredictable. Without that capacity, connection feels pointless. Fact 82. The emergency fantasy. Many lonely people fantasize about emergencies or disasters that would force others to notice and help them. A medical crisis, a natural disaster, a catastrophic life event, something that would make their need visible and legitimate. In these fantasies, the emergency creates connection. Neighbors come together, friends reappear. The lonely person is cared for without having to ask. These fantasies reveal a deep truth. Lonely people often believe they don't deserve help unless they're literally dying. Only extremity justifies need. Fact 83. The voicemail preservation. Lonely people save voicemails for years, sometimes the only recording they have of a loved one's voice. They listen to them repeatedly, sometimes daily. The voicemail becomes a talisman against total isolation, proof that someone once thought them worth calling. When phone companies delete old messages or when people accidentally lose them, the grief can be devastating. That recorded voice was the last thread connecting them to a time when they weren't alone. Now even that is gone. Fact 84. The routine sanctification. Every routine becomes sacred for the chronically lonely. Coffee must be made in exactly the same way each morning. Meals eaten at precise times. Television shows watched on specific days. These routines provide structure that human relationships once provided. They're also fragile fortresses against chaos. When circumstances force a routine to break, a scheduling change, a canceled show, it can trigger genuine crisis. The routine was holding together a self that feels barely coherent. Without it, there's just emptiness and confusion. Fact 85. The documentation compulsion. Some lonely people compulsively photograph or document their daily activities, not for social media but for themselves. They photograph their meals, their walks, the view from their window. This documentation serves as evidence that the day happened, that they existed. Without witnesses, these small moments feel provisional, as if they might not have occurred at all. The photographs are rarely looked at again. The act of recording is what matters. The assertion that this moment, this life, is real. Fact 86. The apology reflex. Lonely people apologize constantly and excessively, even when they've done nothing wrong. Sorry for existing. Sorry for speaking. Sorry for needing. Sorry for being in the way. This overapology reflects internalized shame and the belief that their presence is inherently burdensome. Each apology is a preemptive strike against rejection, an attempt to demonstrate awareness of their own defectiveness. But excessive apology actually irritates others and creates the rejection it's trying to prevent. The reflex reinforces itself. Fact 87. The parallel life. Many lonely people maintain elaborate fantasies of parallel lives, who they would be if circumstances were different. These alternate selves have friends, partners, careers, communities. The fantasy is detailed and consistent, maintained over years. It provides escape and comfort, but it also prevents engagement with actual life. Time and energy spent building the parallel life cannot be spent building the real one. The gap between who they are and who they imagine they could be becomes unbridgeable. The parallel life is perfect. The real life can never compete. Fact 88. The sensory dulling. Extended loneliness dulls all senses. Food tastes bland, colors seem less vivid, music sounds flat. This sensory depression is neurological. Reduced stimulation leads to reduced sensitivity. The brain allocates resources based on use, and in isolation, sensory processing becomes less prioritized. Everything becomes beige and tasteless. This makes the world less interesting, which reinforces the desire to withdraw from it. The external environment comes to match the internal emptiness. Fact 89. The countdown obsession. Lonely people count down to events with obsessive precision. Days until the weekend, hours until sleep, minutes until a show starts. The countdown provides structure and creates the illusion that time is moving towards something. But the event, when it arrives, is inevitably disappointing. The weekend is as empty as the weekday. Sleep doesn't come. The show ends. Then there's just the next countdown to begin. Time becomes a series of empty milestones marking nothing. Fact 90. The invisible audience. Some lonely people develop the conviction that they're being watched, not in a paranoid sense, but in a hopeful one. They behave as if they're the protagonist of a story someone is following. They make decisions imagining how they'd be judged by this invisible audience. This belief makes life feel less pointless. If someone is watching, even hypothetically, then what you do matters. The invisible audience provides meaning that human connection once did. It's an adaptive delusion that makes isolation bearable. Fact 91. The kindness mistranslation. Lonely people often misinterpret simple kindness as romantic or deep personal interest. A cashier's smile, a coworker's casual question. These ordinary social gestures feel monumental when you're starved for connection. This mistranslation leads to inappropriate responses and inevitable rejection, which reinforces the lonely person's sense that connection is impossible. They cannot calibrate social signals correctly because they lack the regular practice that calibrates them. Every interaction is either overinterpreted or dismissed. There's no middle ground. Fact 92. The photograph avoidance. Many lonely people avoid being photographed. This stems partly from low self-worth. They believe they're not worth documenting. But it also reflects a deeper fear, photographic evidence of aloneness. Every photo would be a solo portrait, visual proof of isolation. When forced into photographs, lonely people often look uncomfortable and disconnected, which reinforces their self-image as someone who doesn't belong in social contexts. The absence of photographs eventually means there's no visual record of years of their life. Fact 93. The sleep companion. Lonely people often sleep with the television or a podcast playing, needing the sound of human voices to fall asleep. Total silence is unbearable. It amplifies the awareness of being alone. The background voices create the illusion of presence, of others in the room. Some report they can only sleep to specific voices, particular podcasters or narrators who have become audio companions. If those voices aren't available, sleep becomes difficult or impossible. The parasocial relationship extends even into unconsciousness. Fact 94. The future foreclosure. Chronic loneliness makes it difficult to imagine a future. When asked to envision themselves in 5 or 10 years, lonely people often draw a blank or imagine only negative outcomes. The inability to construct a positive future is both symptom and cause of deepening isolation. Without a future to build toward, present actions feel meaningless. Why pursue opportunities, develop skills, take care of health? The future is an abstract concept that requires hope. Loneliness consumes hope until only the present remains, and the present is unbearable. Fact 95. The permission waiting. Some lonely people wait for explicit permission to reach out to others. They won't call unless someone said, "Call me." They won't attend an event unless personally invited. They won't speak unless spoken to. This waiting reflects the belief that their presence is only acceptable when explicitly requested, but most social interaction operates on implied permission. People expect you to join the conversation, to show up at semi-public events, to initiate contact sometimes. Waiting for explicit permission means waiting forever. Fact 96. The expertise acquisition. Lonely people often become experts in obscure subjects, deep, solitary knowledge about topics that fascinate only them. This expertise provides identity and cognitive engagement in the absence of social roles. It also creates hope for future connection. Someday, someone will care about this thing I know. But the expertise is often so specific that this hope is never realized. No one wants to discuss the topic. The knowledge sits unused, another monument to isolation. Still, the learning continues. It's something to do. Fact 97. The cancellation relief. When plans with others are canceled, lonely people often feel primarily relief rather than disappointment. The anticipatory anxiety about the interaction was consuming more energy than the event would provide. The cancellation removes the burden of performance, the risk of exposure, the exhausting effort of pretending to be okay. This relief is followed by shame and self-recrimination, which makes future socializing even more anxiety-inducing. The cycle tightens. Eventually, the lonely person begins hopping plans will be canceled, even as they're making them. Fact 98. The identity dissolution. Extended loneliness erodes identity itself. Who you are is largely defined by your roles in relation to others, friend, partner, colleague, family member. Without these roles, identity becomes abstract and uncertain. Lonely people report feeling like they don't know who they are anymore. The self requires reflection in others' eyes to remain coherent. Without that reflection, the boundaries of self become fuzzy. Am I still a person if no one knows me? The question isn't philosophical. It's immediate and terrifying. Fact 99. The final witness. Many lonely people develop a preoccupation with who will find their body when they die. This is not suicidal ideation but practical concern. Will it be days, weeks, months? Who will notice the absence? The question reveals a deeper fear, not just dying alone but being alone even in death. The final indignity of isolation is that even your ending might pass unnoticed. Some people set up systems, automatic emails, check-in services, to ensure someone will know. The systems are rarely perfect. The fear remains. Fact 100. The unbearable continuation. Perhaps the darkest fact about loneliness is its ability to make unbearable continuation feel inevitable. Not suicidal, but trapped, unable to imagine either connection or escape. Each day is survived rather than lived. The future stretches out identically to the present, alone, functioning minimally, waiting for nothing in particular. This is the chronic state millions of people inhabit. They go to work, they pay bills, they exist. But they are profoundly, catastrophically alone and they cannot see a way out. The isolation has become structural, built into every aspect of life, and so it continues. The mechanisms are biological. The consequences are measurable. The suffering is real. Loneliness is not a weakness or a choice. It is a condition as serious as any chronic disease, and it is reaching epidemic proportions in the modern world. These 100 facts are not complete. There are thousands more, small realities, documented effects, individual experiences. But they point to a single truth. Human beings are not designed to be alone. When we are, our bodies begin to fail. Our minds begin to fracture. We become something less than human, slowly and quietly, in rooms no one enters.